Okay, this will be a continuation of the folding carton tutorials. In the last tutorial, I built the 3D file of this box and then derived the die line and saved that out as a JPEG so we can print that and prove out the geometry and the functionality of that as a folding carton. Here, I'm going to continue with the 3D development of this, and we're going to bring in texture maps, which is essentially bringing in your art so we can ultimately make a rendering with all the art in position and show the functionality in a digital format. So I took the exact same 3D file that we had, and I took all the panels and spread them apart. Now, I spread them apart this way, not as a die line, because I'm going to map art on each one of these panels. So I'm going to look at this from the front view. Now, these are all the panels that create that box. So we need art for each one of those. So up in the materials area, mine is up at the top right-hand corner here. Yours might be somewhere else, but it's this area called materials with all the cubes. Now, these are good for, setting up our colors and all our textures and things like that. We can bring in pieces of art in each one of these. So I'm going to demonstrate how that works. I'm going to use the front panel art here. I'm going a little bit backwards to show how this works. Normally, when you go into one of these dialogues, up here where it says color map, normally this will be under plain color, and there'll be a cube there. So if you go to the bottom of that dialog box and click on color map, and then go to options, and then go to load, you'll be able to bring in JPEG images. See, these are JPEG images that have been created and separated into individual panels. I'm going to bring in each one of these separately. So this is a little time consuming. As you can see, I have them labeled very distinctively about what they are and where they go. That it will help in the kind of the madness of creating all these little texture maps. So this is the map that we're working on here. So each one of these you will bring in separately. That's that map, and you say OK, and then we're back to our materials parameters. Under the materials parameters, you can leave everything the same. What I did under reflection, since I know this is going to be a flat surface box, no reflectivity, I selected matte under here. And I'm going to do that for each one of these maps. So that particular map is the front left. So if you just take that texture map and drop that right on top here, and then we have to orient that. So if you come down here into attributes, down here at the bottom where the paint can is, and you go to the brick cube with the arrow, and you select that part, this dialog comes up, which is edit the texture map on there. So we can size this and position it and get it in place. This orientation, 90 degrees on X and then it's Y and Z, this flips the panel in space. This will take a little practice to understand what this orientation is. I have it on flat map, since it's just a flat panel. And then down here, this is very important, proportions. We want to make sure that we're staying into the exact proportions. We're locking the proportions to that texture map. And now we can do horizontal or vertical tiling. I happen to know that this panel is 3 3/8 inches wide. So once I select that, that texture map is now perfectly positioned on that panel. Now those cuts that I created on there were done from the last tutorial. Otherwise, this would have been just a flat panel. We could have cut those here at the same time. So I'm not going to do all of these maps. It's a little time consuming. That is the process of setting up these texture maps. So once you have that into position, you need to take all of these panels and reassemble the box, just like we have here. But what I would do is set that up on another layer. So bring that over to another layer. Let's deselect this one. So now I have a completely assembled box here on the right. All the panels are back into position, but they all have art on them. Once you put the art on the texture map and you manipulate the panel, the art will stay with it in orientation. It's very convenient. So you can move that all over the place and it stays with it. This image here on the right is just what's on the inside. Okay, so that's ready to go. So now what I would do is I have to set up the open view of this box. We had this unboxing experience. So I would select this assembled box here with all the art here on the left, make a copy of it and put that to another layer. And I have that, find that here. So you set that up on another layer and you can keep the other one because we're going to render both of these. So now I have moved the panels open to show this glorious unboxing experience. So I started off by, obviously the center is completely assembled and set up. I pivoted out these two side panels, kind of guessing about what it would look like if you were to open it, and then remapped these two outside panels that have now been opened. So now we're looking at the inside of that panel. So I would set those up flat, texture map those, and then re-snap them to the side panels, and then pivot those from the top view and get those into position. So let's take a look at the top view. So I oriented all of these, and one's a little bit more than the other because I kind of worked with the perspective and the point of view. This is a little bit of a judgment call about how this is going to look. Doing a slight 3/4 inch view so we can see how this is assembled. We kind of want to be able to see the art and see how all this works. The gusseted corners came from the die line. If you remember correctly, I created those little curved triangle areas. So I turned those into surfaces and brought them in here because it was on another layer. And then I could put color on them and simulate what that little gusseted corner would look like in the top and put those into position. So that's ready to go for a rendering. So the last part we need to work on, there is a label on the bottle. Let me find my bottle. And there it is, sitting in there with the label on it. So let's deselect this part and let's work directly here. So this is this label is mapped on here, but it's in a cylindrical fashion. So it's a little bit different than a flat. If I mapped flat art on the front of this, it would get a little distorted as it goes around the curve. So we can, one of the options, there are several options, but another option is we can map in a cylindrical fashion. So I built this cylindrical shape as a surface, top and bottom, and you can see I mapped the art on there. This particular art is not the full label all the way around. It doesn't have all the drug packs. It just has the branded area on the front. So I'm going to trim that out so I can get that into position. But first, let's talk about how this is texture mapped. So again, you just drop the image, the JPEG image from here, just drop it on there, and then we can manipulate that again under attributes with this texture edit tool. So if I select that, now I have done this already, so I'm sort of backing into this. We can select cylindrical. So under here, we had all these other different ways of doing that. So we're going to do cylindrical on this one and wrap it around. So when you do that, it's 0 for X, 0 for Y, and then we're basically rotating. So I'm going to, I know this is negative 32 degrees. So let's just put in an arbitrary number. I can show you what happens. See, the art is rotating around there. So it takes a little bit to get that into position. So once you get that into position, let's go back to negative 32 degrees. And we have that. So now I'm going to go to the front view. And I see that label sitting there very nicely. But I don't want the rest of this label in the back because it's just a repeat of the same piece of art. So I created this line. I'm going to trim this. I built this line with this little handle on it so I can see. So let's look from the right side. And I have it lined up. Let's move that. See, right by that edge, I'm going to trim everything away. So I'm going to put that right there. And I'm going to go to my trim tool. which is right here under Modify, Trim Split. And if I select With Line, no stitching. And if I select this label area, see it's illuminated in red, and I trim with this line, I will have just that front part of the label. So that's a piece of geometry that I created, the cylinder, map the art with the cylindrical mapping tool, and then trim that so I have just the label in the front. So now that is ready to go. Okay, so that's it for the texture mapping. So we did flat mapping and cylindrical texture mapping. Next tutorial, we're going to bring all these pieces together and we're going to talk about rendering the different views of this box structure.